Welcome back to Binging the Force, a Star Wars watch party podcast. I'm Michael, your host this week, and joining me are returning favorites, Kim and Jefferson.
Hello.
So this week we'll be staying in the timeline and kind of the same kind of time area that we've been in between episode 3 and episode 4. So similar time space that Han Solo takes place in. But between episodes 3 and episode 4 of Star Wars with the Disney Plus series Andor and its first episode, Kassa. So our question this week for both you guys to kind of have some opinions on, because it's going to come up, I think, a lot in this show. It came up in asking people who wanted to take part in this episode this week, and people were started talking about what is Star Wars, and it is something that definitely gets talked about a lot, because there are people saying, "Well, that's not Star Wars." I mean, what is Star Wars?
You want to go first, Kim, or shall I?
You go.
Okay, Sky. I was thinking about this today. I was going to bring this up if we didn't have a question about it. So to me, first and foremost, Star Wars is a setting that transcends any particular story or character. It's always been the strong suit in Star Wars has always been the setting and how naturalistic it is. I hesitate to use the word realistic with a story about space wizards, but it's very naturalistic. Stuff is dirty. People worry about money. It's a really well-developed setting in which you should be able to tell any number of different kinds of stories. With that in mind, I feel like the thing that made the original movies brilliant was that George Lucas took three things and combined them. He took Westerns, samurai movies, and World War II movies and mushed them all together and made this great thing. And so I think the vast majority of Star Wars stories are that they're either Jedi stories, scoundrel stories, or war stories about either the Clone War or the Rebellion. And Andor is firmly in that third group. Andor is absolutely a World War II story set in space. It leans in more towards the sort of
scoundrel. It's also a scoundrel story.
A bit, yeah. I mean, it starts out kind of as both, and that's the thing about. I mean, Star Wars is you can take stuff from column A and stuff from column B. And that's what makes one of the things that makes it so great and makes the story so interesting. And the Clone Wars did that a lot too. They did stories about the war, and they did stories where they had to interact with the sort of criminal underbelly. And of course, most of the stories feature Jedi, but they didn't always do stories that were about Jedi in particular. And Andor, I think it very much is a World War II spy story. It very much is about the French resistance, resisting the Nazis, and building up to resist the oppressive government. And so I don't think you can say that it's not Star Wars, because it absolutely is. And I think the reason that it seems to resonate more with older Star Wars fans is that it is a bit more grim. I don't want to say it's more adult, but it's a little, the tone is a little bit more grown up and maybe sophisticated compared to some other Star Wars material that tends to be more kind of goofy and fun loving. And I think there's room for all of that in the wider world of Star Wars.
I think you hit on a couple of good points, like space. It has to be space. Mm-hmm. And grunge. I mean, it's like they've been in war for so long. I don't care what planet, because you have Darth Vader just going around crapping on everything. So yeah, this is Star Wars. This is the Star Wars I've been wanting to see for a long time. I love the Rebels, and I love how did they topple this big empire? Like, how do you do that? And of course, there's politics in there and all that. So it's just, this is Star Wars. I don't know why people say it's not very Star Warsy to them.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it didn't even have to have space. I mean, to me, what is Star Wars? Star Wars is a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. It is a place. It is a time. It is like you said, a setting, but it's not a specific setting. It's a universe. It's a world that has now been built out, and that world is going to have as any world would, lots of different stories in it, and you should be able to, within the framework of that, as long as it still fits into the universe. And that's where you can kind of say, like, what fits in the universe, what doesn't fit in the universe. But really, to me, like, as long as you have some elements of the aesthetic, as long as you have some elements of like good forces and evil forces, and rebels and empires, and the forces of the underdog against the overlord, that's Star Wars. That's the setting that we're living in. But I think we're even going to probably transcend that, because I know that they have in the works series that take place 10,000 years previously, where it's going to be a whole different dynamic. But I think there's still going to be some essential elements that are always going to be there, in that it all takes place in a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, and now, as of Ahsoka, 2 galaxies far, far away. But yeah, that's, to me, Star Wars should be a big umbrella. It really should be just an overall thing that stories can be, because that's the thing. Like, what's a Marvel story? What's a DC story? What's a Steven Spielberg movie?
Yeah, I think people try to get so macro. They only get to one little character, and they try to like over explain this one character.
Yeah.
And then that guy comes up in smoke. And then, but you have you have 2 galaxies to explore. And why not?
Yeah.
Why not have Andor? Why not have the underbelly of how the rebellion succeeded?
I mean, just like any good filmmaker, or any good actor, I mean, any good creative person will tell you, they never want to do the same thing over and over and over again. They always want to try to flex their creative muscle and do different things. And I would say Star Wars as a franchise is like a living thing. It is made up of many creative people, but it's many creative people endeavoring to continue to build this organism that is Star Wars. And so Star Wars is going to want to be different things,
Right. Especially now that they're generating so much new material.
Yeah.
Where, back at the beginning, we got 2 hours every 3 years, and that was all we got. And so if it was still coming out at that rate, I could see maybe people being upset about, well, that was our 2 hours for this 3-year period, and I didn't like it. Wham. But we're getting, I don't know how many hours every year now.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if you don't like what's going on with Star Wars, just, wait 6 months.
There'll be another one. Yeah. There'll be one that you like better. Yeah.
Exactly.
That's the thing, we talked previously that, like, my particular thing in Star Wars, the thing that I'm most passionate about in Star Wars, the thing that gets me the most excited about Star Wars, is Jedi in their prime action. So Ahsoka for me was a pinnacle. But that's the thing, is like, this series Andor, I thought was one of the best things on television I saw last year, because it's really well-made drama. And it's just really well-made drama within the Star Wars umbrella, within the Star Wars envelope. So, I mean, it doesn't have to be the thing in Star Wars that specifically appeals to me or gets my juices flowing for me to still think it's great storytelling and great Star Wars. Yeah. Well, on that note, let's go ahead and jump into our episode 1 of Star Wars Andor, Kassa. See, it's Star Wars.
Yeah. Says it right there.
It's right on the screen.
Yeah. I don't see where the debate is. There's no room for any argument here.
Now, of course, the Star Wars logo came in and out really, really quickly. This Andor logo takes about a week and a half.
Right. Forever
like, okay, we see something's coming here. It might say something by the time we start a new episode next week.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I like it, though. I like it because it kind of replaces the title crawl. And if memory serves,
we do not have a title crawl. Yeah.
Yeah, correct me if I'm wrong, but of the feature films, Rogue One is the only one that doesn't have some kind of title crawl. Is that correct?
I don't remember.
Yeah, I think it is, because
I can't remember if Solo had one.
It did. It didn't do a crawl the same way, but it had a little explanation of all the gangs and stuff.
Gotcha.
The gangs.
All right.
So we see someone walking.
So when I was watching, I rewatched this last night, and I was thinking, especially as we get a little farther on here, it's a bit Blade Runner, this opening.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely aesthetic wise, there's a lot of Blade Runner.
Very
so
moody.
What is BBY 5?
It means before the Battle of Yavin. The Battle of
Okay.
Yavin is the 0 point for all the Star Wars timeline information.
So I missed it. What did it say? Were
5 years. This,
No, that's what I thought. Okay, yeah.
yeah.
So we're in the same time frame. Same
Yeah, I think
time frame as Solo, basically 5
Solo's
years.
meant to be 10 years before, so we're about 5 years after Solo, but
Oh, is it? Okay, because I know Obi-Wan was 10 years exactly.
yeah. Yeah, I think Solo and Obi-Wan take place at about the same time.
Okay.
And this is a little later, but this series is Rogue One is clearly just a week before the Battle of Yavin.
Yeah.
So
Rogue One is like 5 minutes, BB.
Right,
Well,
So however long
5
it
minutes
takes
before
that.
the movie that has Battle of Yavin, but I guess if you go through the whole movie of Episode 4, it's probably a couple of days. So so about a week BBY for.
So
for
you're not a video gamer, Jefferson?
No, not really.
Okay. Jeff plays a game, Mass Effects.
Yeah, I've heard of it.
And this reminds me a lot of that. They have like the strip clubs with, holograms and stuff in there.
I like it. I mean, they're giving us a more kind of seamy and adult corner of the Star Wars universe, but I like that they're not that overt about it.
No,
it's
still Disney, but
yeah, kids who watched Episode 1 could still watch this. I mean, some of it might be a little over their heads, but there's nothing here that you wouldn't want to subject a younger viewer to, which I think is good. I think it's important that they keep Star Wars accessible to everybody.
But Andor is a more mature show. It definitely has more mature subject matter, more mature themes than a lot of other Star Wars.
But not it doesn't go too far is the point I'm making.
Correct.
It's still anybody could watch it without.
Well, it's on a thematic level to where if you're an adult and you're catching it. If you're a kid, you're not.
Right, exactly.
Like this whole setup or him talking to the madam and whatever.
Right.
Like kids won't know.
But
right, exactly.
We know he wants something. What are you looking for? He came in here looking for something, and it's not a date.
Right. Yeah, he looks way too intense to be there looking for fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, he is looking for a girl though.
One thing that I remember noticing the first time I watched this through when it was originally I guess broadcast isn't the right word, but whatever it was
not correct either. Streamed.
And this is owing to the tone of this and how different the tone of this is from everything that we've seen previous to this as far as the TV Star Wars goes. There are very few aliens in this.
True. Yeah.
And no main characters are aliens. They're all any aliens that we see, and there are not very many, are background players. We'll see if I'm right, but if I remember correctly, there's only one alien that has any lines at all in this first episode, and he has like 2 lines in this for
the
comedy.
Bartender, she can't.
Yeah, the bartender was alien-ish, but still not as. I mean, Star Wars aliens tend to be a lot more masky and less makeup-y than other things do. In Star Wars, you're either human or you're not. There's not that many aliens that are just have a lumpy forehead or a weird skin color.
Yeah, well, and we know that that it all takes place now in an occupied empire, and we know that the emperor very famously did not like aliens.
Yeah, it's anti-alien. Yeah. Which was a clever way to explain why the earlier movies don't have nearly as many aliens in them as later movies. Also, again, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe this is the first and so far only live action Star Wars TV that doesn't have Dave Filoni or Jon Favreau's name on it anywhere.
True. Yeah, I was going to mention the writer, the showrunner on this was Tony Gilroy, who also wrote Rogue One, but he is definitely not a sci-fi filmmaker. He is definitely not someone in this world. I mean, they brought in someone specifically. He directed the Bourne Identity movies, or he wrote the Bourne Identity movies, or the whole Bourne series. Michael Clayton, things that you would not associate with someone who would be a Star Wars filmmaker.
Right. So he has a very different axe to grind than Filoni and Favreau do.
Yeah.
And it shows. It definitely shows.
He's coming to it from a whole different perspective. It's like, and again, this is creative people getting to play in this universe,
Right.
that are not doing it in a way that, Filoni, it definitely had, Filoni and Favreau definitely have a whole different take on what to do in the Star Wars universe.
Well, they have an
than
agenda
George.
too. They're doing a timeline, and these ones are just writing the story. A really good.
Well, I mean, but they're also doing stuff that specifically is like tied to other things in Star Wars, tied to other themes, tied to other ideas. Having Jedi, having Mandalorians. This is a spy story. This is
Yep.
just a guy, a resistance story. Like Jefferson was saying. This is a new Star Wars.
So this is Star Wars, right? And so PG usually and everything. Do you think what's going to go down is going to go down like when you're originally first watching this?
I have to admit that it surprised me a little. The grimness of it surprised me a little bit when I first watched it. But as I said earlier, I feel like it stops short of being objectionable. It's grim, yes, but it never goes too far, I don't think.
Yeah, I was just like, holy crud.
Even what we're about to see here, with him fighting with these two guys and how he chooses to resolve this situation is pretty grim. But two things. First, we already established in Rogue One that Andor is a very ruthless character.
Yeah.
And two, the horrible thing that he's about to do, we cut away from. We don't see it in graphic detail.
No, but I think this guy accidentally died, and now he's like, crap.
Yeah, he didn't create the situation. The situation was accidental. Then he does what he has to do in the situation to get out of the situation. But we're also dealing with, as we said, it is a world of scoundrels, and Han shot first.
Right. Although in this case, I think we're establishing how ruthless Cassian is compared to the other characters. Luke Skywalker would have let this guy go. Han Solo probably would have let this guy go.
Yeah.
But Cassian's not going to let this guy go.
I'd also argue that they have advantages that he doesn't have.
Yeah.
I mean, that's Luke Skywalker, has a status in this universe. Han Solo even, has a status in this universe. Andor's under the building of this universe.
He's a lot more desperate.
Yeah, exactly. He does not have a lot of choices in life. He has no connections. He has no ties. He has no someone who's going to get him out of this, if he gets arrested,
Well, even the madam made it sound like, sorry to hear that you're from Torini or whatever, like, sorry for you. That must suck.
Yeah.
I mean, in terms of social strata here, like I said, he's under the totem pole. I mean, no one's going to bail him out. I mean, he is a man of his wits. Everything he has and everything he gets and everything he does is by his own choosing, is by his own effort. No one is helping him out.
Right.
By himself.
And he has I don't know about more lofty goals, but he clearly has a more intense mission than, like, say, Han Solo does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love this droid. This guy's great.
Yeah.
He's the droids are usually the comic relief in Star Wars, and he manages to be that without being a clown, without being silly.
Yeah.
Because that would undermine the tone of this show too much if he was too goofy. Yeah. But we get some nice sort of grim comedy relief here with the pig dogs, whatever they are.
We got the little thing that R2 used at one point to kind of shock a creature away from him. Yep, their little defense mechanism they have there.
Is there a remote control toy of this droid? I think I need one if there is.
I'm the wrong person to ask that.
Yeah, I know. And I don't, and the fact that I'm asking, I don't keep up too closely with merchandise.
You're on the lookout for all the stuff that's not made.
Yeah.
I mean, is it basically a junk planet or just a junkyard that the ship happens to sit in?
I think it's a junkyard, because we find out a little later he borrowed the ship.
Okay.
From the guy who runs or not even the guy who runs the junkyard, but like the assistant guy who runs the junkyard.
So now we get the flashback that kind of establishes who it is he's looking for and why.
And I like that they don't spoon feed us this. They don't really explain what this is, but we can kind of infer that it's sort of a Lord of the Flies kind of situation where it's a bunch of castaways who are all children.
Now the movies never do flashbacks. They're
No,
I don't
they're very
believe
linear.
that there's ever such a thing really as a flashback in the feature films. I don't think
No.
we really ever got a flashback in Star Wars potentially until Mandalorian.
Yeah, I think you're right. Because the movies had a very specific. I mean, unless you want to call episodes 1, 2, and 3 one gigantic flashback, but they're really not.
No,
yeah, you're right.
From a stylistic, from a directorial and editorial and writing choice, we've never like just cut away to a flashback. You know that is not even like, you know, we're not even specifically like looking at a screen or anything like that. You know, we are seeing in our mind's eye, you know, something that happened to this character previously.
Right.
I'm now making an argument against it, but I'm not trying to. You know, that's new for Star Wars. You know,
Yeah, a bit.
I think Mandalorian was the first time they really did it.
I'm reminded actually there are a few very short flashback scenes in the sequel films where Rey remembers being a child, and then especially in The Last Jedi, when we see Luke's version of events of what happened at the Jedi Temple. Later we see Kylo's version of the same event.
The sequel trilogy established flashbacks. Okay. But yeah, so we see that his name originally was not Cassian, it was Kassa, which is the title of the episode. So that was originally his name, and he had a sister.
And that's who he was trying to find in the bar.
And it's a great use of the flashback because now we're more intrigued. You know, how did he get from what we just saw to here?
Yeah, he's got a backstory.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, how did he go from Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome to this?
Well, it seemed like it was actually pretty idyllic. He had this like kind of idyllic, like, you know, Lord of the Flies, but done well, where the kids are all taking care of each other and watching out for each other and kind of working together as a unit and everything.
Right, but at the same time, there's that one shot we kind of talked past it where when the ship flies over the camp that all the kids are living in, one of them is jumping up and down and waving. So clearly they're, you know, that to me tells me that they are castaways and they're waiting for
but
rescue.
I think, but they were, but prior to that intervention, they were living a fairly peaceful life together.
Yeah, they're not eating each other or anything like that. Certainly, I like the setting. I like the town and the design of it.
The town's almost a whole other character in this show.
Exactly, and this proves my point that I was making earlier about how the Star Wars is the setting as much as it is anything else.
Yeah.
And this is just the town, and even like the cinematography and the kind of overcast lighting really sets the tone. It sets the tone that maybe these people aren't all that happy.
No.
As a costume maker, all I could think of is, why does everyone have to be wearing a hat?
Are hats a problem in the costume world?
Yeah, the hats are not fun to make. And then, like, you know, if you got to charge $100 for it or whatever, people are like, why so much for a hat? Well, you make it.
Right.
Yeah. You make one and tell me
how
easy.
Made that hat, you would have made that hat.
Yeah. Don't bitch at me.
So working in kind of a factory or mines, or, you know, kind of a menial,
like a mine of some kind, and then like
kind
people
of blue
can
collar
tell
drudgery.
Who's working by what gloves are still hanging or something.
And I think we infer from this that Cassian works there too, but he doesn't show up for work very much.
Right.
Because he's got more important things to do.
So he's like telling him a story, like, you need to say this if people ask.
Right. Here's the let's get our story straight.
And he's like, are you serious? You want me to say that?
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see, because I can't remember from the first time watching, but it'll be interesting to see, was the event that we saw earlier with the two guys who hassled him, was that the first time he had to do something that ruthless? You know, was that what set him on this path, or was there stuff before that made him this kind of intense and desperate?
Well, I would say to be the man that he did in that situation, he would have had to have had other stuff to have made him that man. So,
yeah, Yeah, I would think so too. So I look forward to if that's so, to seeing that, because I feel like this series, while it does cover some interesting events, I feel like this is a character piece. This is really about two characters. This episode is just about Cassian. It's telling us about why he's the way he is and who he is, and so the story is about him more than it is about any particular event that takes place. And then when they introduce Mon Mothma later, it's also about her. And so we jump back and forth between those two characters.
I mean, there are a couple multiple storylines because
yeah. But they're about. My point is,
I would actually call the other main character of the show the guy we're getting introduced to here.
Oh yeah, he's definitely one of them. He's I guess so. I guess we have maybe 4 main characters then, but they all relate to one or the other of either Cassian.
Sure. Well, all the storylines end up tying together.
Yeah. Yeah, this is a nice little bit of quick, easy character introduction. We now know
some piping and tailoring. That's all.
Yeah.
I just did a couple of mods to my uniform.
Yeah, he's
establishing who this guy is. That he is like the most OCD of OCD. You know
sure.
That he is very about the rules. He is very about doing everything a specific way. And then we find out what happens to him when that world gets broken for him.
Yeah, he's.
I actually do end up feeling sorry for him, which
bit, yeah, because he takes his job seriously. He wants to be good at his job. He's basically Rimmer from Red Dwarf. He's the guy who just blindly follows the rules.
This old guy's like, "Oh, you're just making more work for me, dude."
Right. To do it the proper way, to follow the rules, to fill out all the paperwork. You're just making my life hard because I'm sitting in this chair for the next. I've been sitting in this chair for the last 25 years. I'll be here for the next 15 till I retire.
Yeah.
And that, I mean, and I'll continue the argument that this definitely is Star Wars, but like this sort of thing, this scene goes back to. There's a scene in the original film where all of the Imperial generals are sitting around the conference table. Waiting for Tarkin and Vader to show up, and they're having a conversation about what's going on, and it's very much like this. It's very much kind of work a day. God, this is such a hassle kind of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, in the Empire, you've really got that bifurcation there. You've got the Emperor and Darth Vader, who are Sith and people of magic and people making decisions and people running stuff, and then you've got everyone under them who are all middle managers.
Yeah, they're all bureaucrats. Exactly.
I mean, Tarkin, you could say, has a little bit of exceptionalism to it, but really he's just the best at being the bureaucrat, you know?
Yeah, but at the same time, he's really, I mean, I feel like the original film set him up to be a more important character than Vader.
Yeah.
Because Vader is subservient to him throughout the whole first film. But of course, I mean, put those two characters next to each other. Which one do kids want a toy of? It's pretty clear.
Hey, I was a total Peter Cushing fan as a kid.
I one of the Star Wars miniature games that I play. So the legend goes that in the filming of the original movie, Peter Cushing, he thought his boots were too uncomfortable, and so most of the time he just wore slippers. Right. Somebody resculpted the miniature of Tarkin, and they have him in his slippers and his rolled up. It's hilarious.
Yeah, I mean, I totally grew up on Hammer horror films. Peter Cushing, Christopher Lee, who comes into the saga and the prequels.
Yeah.
Which was very exciting for me to have kind of bookended that of, like, you know, having had Peter Cushing in the beginning, then getting Christopher Lee, like, you know, 25 years later.
Yeah. And I know that was very intentional on Lucas's part. He wanted really high profile actors in the smaller parts.
Yeah.
Apparently he wanted, we shouldn't be talking about this while we're watching Andor, but I'm going to throw it in anyway. He wanted Toshiro Mifune to play Obi-Wan Kenobi. That was his first choice, but he couldn't get him to do it. Toshiro Mifune, if you don't know, is the star of most of Kurosawa's samurai movies from the 50s and 60s.
So I mean, now we get to meet all of his friends. We've met the guy at the kind of factory, the mines or whatever, who's kind of his buddy, and he got him to lie for him, and now we meet kind of his female buddy. And it's all about, I mean, he has relationships, but are those relationships or are they people he uses?
Right, exactly. And
Are
it's
they, are they
not
a relationship based on what he can get from them?
and it's not Star Wars without a grumpy mechanic.
And if she's hot, that's cool too.
Yeah.
Well, tell your story. Either tell the stories that are not what we're watching, or talk about what we're watching. But you got to do one.
Right. Yeah, I was just absorbed for a minute.
Yeah, that's what we can't do.
Exactly.
But it's compelling. It is compelling drama. I mean, there is some electricity between the two of them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's definitely something, and you wonder, but you don't see anything that goes on.
But that leads into what becomes an important part of the story, even in what we're going to see shortly with her, the guy she works for, who we don't know if they're meant to be a couple or not.
Yeah.
But he's gonna follow her when she leaves to go do this little errand for Andor, for Cassian. And I feel like we're definitely leaning more on the side of he's using these people. He's cultivated these relationships with people that can do things for him.
Right.
Yeah.
And
he definitely operates with purpose.
Yeah, that's very consistent with the character that we met in Rogue One. He's a very, very ruthless, no nonsense character.
Yeah, and then he calls her out. Well, you've been taken off the top, like don't blame me. I'm not the only one bad person.
Right. It's as argument winners go, it's low hanging fruit, but again, whatever it takes to get what he wants or what he thinks he needs. What's unclear at this point is what his goal is. What is he trying to accomplish?
Right. Well, we know that he was in the bar, trying to find out information about a girl, and then we kind of surmise that the girl was his sister, so something's obviously happened to her. We don't know what. We don't know what his full story is. But in the course of that, now he got in trouble, and so now kind of his purpose is, how do I keep myself from really getting in trouble?
Right, exactly.
What things do I have to do? What things do I have to put in place? Who do I have to use? What do I have to do to cover my tracks so that I don't, literally spend the rest of my life in a prison?
Right. And again, what was he doing before that led him to this point where he already has these relationships with people that can help him with this stuff? It's interesting.
Yeah, when did he come to this area and not the village where he was from?
Right. Yeah, that's what we're going to see is, how did he get from that kid, that sort of innocent kid in the village to this guy?
Yeah. Who definitely seems to have a particular set of skills.
Yes, he does. He's very a bit. I mean, but like the greatest Star Wars characters, and I think that the reason why all the characters in Star Wars are so appealing is his particular set of skills are not fully developed. He got himself into this situation in the first place through a screw up. And that I was talking about this last week when we talked about Solo. That to me is what's so endearing about most of the characters in Star Wars, are that they're flawed. They're not perfect characters. They're not super competent. They're not James Bond. They mess up. They make mistakes.
Right. They're not a person who walks into a situation and knows exactly how they're going to get out of that situation.
Yeah, exactly. They are very rarely that person.
Lord of the Flies here.
Yeah. There was a Doctor Who episode in the 80s that had a very similar kind of Lord of the Flies, kids who had their ship had crashed and they had formed this society, and they even wore the same colors as these guys. They wore yellow and orange. I might have to cry foul a little bit.
But I want to specify again, this seems way more idyllic than that. They are actually working together. They seem pretty happy. They've got this really good existence until there's other intervention, until an outside force intervenes. So,
well, and you get maybe the impression. I mean, I'm reading into this because I've not been given any information that verifies this, but you get the impression that maybe they were all very tiny children when whatever happened when they were marooned here. And so they think they need to wait for rescue because that's what their parents were doing. but not because they actually feel like they need to leave this. But that's just
Right.
it's a learned behavior to hope for rescue,
Right.
and they probably don't even understand what that really means.
Yeah, so they're doing the war paint here, and Cassian went to go put it on, and they're like, "No, you're not allowed." Like, and then the head lady was like, "Yeah, he can go." So they're gonna go hunting, I guess.
Well, that's the thing. They're going to want to find out what is this thing that has come into their world. You know, is it a rescue or is it an attack? You know?
Yeah.
This was a great shot here of him standing outside the door trying to work up the nerve to go inside. Is a lot of really subtle sort of character building there where they establish him.
Yeah, that preparation thing of building yourself up to go act important, you know?
Yeah, exactly. They really I can't remember this character's name. I don't know if we've been told his name yet, but they really did a great job with telling us everything we need to know about him in really simple strokes. You know, they don't spell it out for us, but they use these just really simple things like, you know, less than a second of him waiting outside the door. But that speaks volumes about what kind of person he is.
Yeah. But it's also, I mean, it's one of the rare times where we've really done, I mean, over the course of this season, where we really get a full in-depth inner life and inner world of a middle manager in the Empire. You know, what is it like to be a cog in this wheel? You know,
Sure.
like we get glimpses of it. We'd get moments here and there of characters, but never were we followed for an entire season one character's through line of like, you know, what it's like to be him. You know, in this world,
right? Yeah, those types of characters haven't ever mattered this much before,
right?
So it looks like he ran into someone else that needs something.
Yeah, well, he owes this guy money. It sounds like. So I think we're meant to infer that Cassian is just kind of a layabout. You know,
there's an alien.
And this is the one I was talking about too. This is the only one who has any lines, and it's comedy relief. He's meant to be the imposing muscle, but
he's the muscle.
He's a goof. He doesn't understand why he's really there. He just says, "Well, this guy told me all I had to do was stand here." And
take orders.
Yeah, and Cassian kind of says, no, it's fine. It's a great little scene. We're not really getting the meat of the scene with the subtitles. It's not doing it justice. But it's a fun scene, and yeah, this is, like I said, I think the only alien that actually has any lines in the whole episode, and it's a comedy bit basically.
Good to see you. I got to move on.
And he got out of that. Even that guy looks confused. Like, how did that happen?
He seems to get what he wants by talking really fast. Our Cassian does. You know, make people dizzy. And then here goes his friend to go do what she needs to do for him, but now suspicious. I don't know if it's suspicious boyfriend or just suspicious
boss, partner, boyfriend.
Yeah, it's a boyfriend. He said you pick like strange, like some kind of women, controlling women or something like that.
Yeah, it's kind of
and he's gonna follow her. He doesn't trust her.
Yeah,
it's toxic masculinity one way or the other.
Even in space.
But he's gonna have a little mishap. And
look at all those hats.
Yeah, I know, a lot of hats.
Oh,
I hadn't really considered that before, but I guess that's a good point. Because it's not like you can just go
not wearing either a hat or some sort of alien headpiece, you know. So,
well, yeah, because we need to know,
right, who's the person we're supposed to care about in this moment.
Right. The only time it's useful to have your main character wearing a hat is if they're going to be doing a lot of stuff where they need a stunt double,
or they need to hide.
Yeah, a la Indiana Jones. You know, and I just about got to that point after being at Disney World and having to use a little app to translate that Imperial alphabet. I can almost read it now. I'm close. I'm close to being able to read it without looking it up.
There's a lot of people that can read it.
Yeah, I'm sure.
I had Sith chick on my helmet, and people are like, "Sith chick?" I'm like, "What?"
Sneaky. This place apparently sells a lot of hoses or conduits.
A lot of wire.
Yeah. And up we go.
She's going to be climbing up this tower to tap into the radio to try to get a message out. This is what Cassian, I think, wanted her to do.
Mm.
He needs to sell that thing.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah,
has
but it's still
something-
unclear as whether does he just need money to continue his search for his sister. I think that's maybe what we're meant to piece together. We're
Yeah, so
still
she's
not sure why he's so driven to do all of this.
So she's tapping out a message to
She's
someone.
contacting someone, right? Someone who we'll meet next week.
Oh, blue
This is
noodles.
great. All of these
That's new.
sort of like low-level bureaucrats. We had blue shrimp at the Star Cruiser last week.
Oh,
that was one of the
sweet.
meals that we had. It was pretty much that same color as those noodles that guy just had.
That's crazy.
6
Here he
years
is
ago,
bossing
that's
around
the last census from the Empire 6 years ago. So they don't really have information about who he's looking for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So of course he has to find it, right?
Yeah, even though his boss told him like leave it alone, we can move on. There's a lot of paperwork, he can't let it go. It's an I that must be dotted. It's a T that must be crossed. It's just who he is. He's just
I think he's also bumping to try to get a promotion.
Yeah.
He wants to be in higher command. He doesn't want to be.
Well, because in his existence, that's all there is. And when you're in middle management, that is your whole existence, is to get up the next rung on the ladder.
Well, and then you will get to meet his mother. Oh my gosh. Then you'll know why.
More his character is makes a lot more sense once we meet his mother.
Right. Yeah.
So
that's what I'm saying is it's really for an Imperial officer, it's the furthest in depth we get in terms of their inner life, their inner world.
Yeah.
Right. And he's not really, I don't think they're technically Imperials. I think they're the local government that works under the Empire. But I think what we're getting is that
they're Empire adjacent. They're basically a corporate entity adjacent to the Empire, like a corporate entity that's attached to the Empire or beholden to the Empire.
Right, exactly. So why, the Empire didn't feel the need to go in and replace all those people. They just
I mean, that's
gave them a new rule book to work
always
from.
does whatever's the cheapest thing they can get away with. Which okay, if we don't have to replace everyone with Imperial people, we'll just keep using this contractor.
Well, and then that's what the rebels end up doing, like keeping all the Imperials, and then you don't think that they're not going to have an agenda and still be on the other side of the war.
Yeah. The point though that was made during the scene you're talking about from Ahsoka is mostly a valid point, that the cogs in the machine don't really care who's in charge.
Right.
They don't care Emperor Palpatine or Mon Mothma. It makes no difference. Yeah. It makes no difference to their day-to-day lives. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, when you're a cog in a machine, you don't care who's pushing the button to turn it on.
Right, exactly.
So here's differ by we see this guy. He cares, obviously.
So Cassian's junkyard buddy has now told him that he can't borrow the ship anymore. And what this tells us too is that Cassian doesn't have the means. He doesn't own his own ship. He has to borrow this ship when he wants to go off planet.
So he's slipping out some ID. Some ID chips and stuff. And that guy's like, I don't like what you're doing. This is kind of fishy, so I don't want you borrowing it anymore.
Back on Andor Romper Room.
Yeah.
That's a reference that no one's going to get under the age of 40.
The Ewoks are people still. They haven't evolved yet.
We don't see it in this episode, but this sort of parallel story of him as a child, we get to see some nice shorthand as well. The fact that the story is set in an established fictional universe, there's a lot of great shorthand that they get to use to tell us things like how long ago it is. They can use, like I was talking about in Solo last week, they can use stormtroopers or a shorthand. We already know what stormtroopers are. They don't have to explain it. And we're going to see some of that next week that we'll talk about next week once they find the crashed ship, where they get to use some more of that shorthand, so that Star Wars universe shorthand that establishes what the time period is and who these people are, whose ship this is, and all of that kind of thing.
So it's kind of an abrupt, interesting ending that it ended in the flashback, and it ended in the flashback with him leaving with everyone else, and leaving his sister. But he leaves the sister to somber music,
Right.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's going to go well for them, but we'll find out next week.
Yeah, I mean, then the tone of this, as we've said, is quite a bit grimmer than what we're used to, and we know that this is essentially Rogue One, the series.
Yeah.
And then that film also had a pretty grim tone overall compared to the other Star Wars films. And that's not a criticism. That's an observation that it just has a different tone to it.
It's a choice. I mean, it's an artistic choice that it's a downbeat story.
Yeah. And I think there's room for that.
And there are, over the course of the episodes, we'll see there are some uplifting moments, but it is for the most part a downbeat story.
Yeah, and I think that's what it does well, and what Rogue One did well was choosing those moments of comic relief and not letting them take you out of the tone. They because you have to have something. It can't be just this.
That's the thing. I mean, not just comic relief. I don't want to get too far down the weeds to later on, but I mean, we will have triumphant moments. We will have We'll have moments of failure. We'll have moments of success.
Yeah, you can't watch a story where the hero loses over and over again. That gets depressing.
Yes, there will be moments of triumph and success. They will be short-lived.
Right, exactly.
Star Wars.
Yeah. And it's Star Wars, and it's this is both a good and bad, an advantage and a disadvantage. It's Star Wars, and it's during a period where we know what comes next already. So he can't have any effect on events in the immediate future. We know he can't win in that way because we know what happens after this. But so that's maybe a downside in that we know he can't really have any effect on what's going to happen. But at the same time, it also gives us this great shorthand and this great sort of setting, and they can tell us a story about this character using that.
Agreed.
Any other thoughts and notes on this episode, Kim?
No, I love it. I love the show.
Cool. Well, next week we'll be doing episode 2, and that would be me. Is the title of it. So thank you for joining us here on Binging the Force. You can find us on Facebook at Binging the Force. On any podcast clients, just look for Binging the Force if you want to listen to us in audio. You can buy our merch at bingingtheforce.myspreadshop.com. And most importantly, to help us grow, go ahead and like and subscribe us on YouTube at Binging the Force. Well, thank you, Kim. Thank you, Jefferson, our favorites, our mainstays. And we'll see everyone next week for Binging the Force. Because I didn't say that enough in the last 30 seconds.
Goodbye.